McCain-Rose Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just take a moment. I'd like to address the comments just made by my colleague from Calgary Mountain View. And I like that he laid everything out in a list. That's helpful to put your thoughts out that way. So in terms of punishment, he asked, how do we prescribe a specific punishment? Should we be doing that here? And to rebut that, I would like to ask, how do we prescribe specific remedies that are sufficient to show survivors of sexual assault in these circumstances that what happened to them has our attention, has gravity, and is being taken seriously. And the reason that we're seeing these amendments is because the way the legislation stands right now, many of us and many people I've spoken to do not believe that 5 years is a sufficient amount of time, even if that's the minimum, even if that's not what happens ever. It isn't sufficient to demonstrate to survivors of sexual assault by health professionals that what occurred to them is unacceptable. Next was the loss of professional status and what the position of the role of the professional college should be. And I don't think anyone here has suggested or recommended that we take away any other authorities from these professional colleges. We're simply asking that the legislation reflect the gravity of this particular kind of offence, whether they are charged criminally or not, or if they are found to be responsible by the college, which would include their peers and other people. So it's not a matter of trying to take away anything from the professional colleges. It's trying to create a standard that can be followed for any professional college, whether it's for health or law or whatever it is, that sexual assault is unacceptable in our society, and we will create the framework of legislation to reflect that appropriately. And finally, the last question, to what extent should this be legislated? So to what extent do we support survivors in their recovery from the trauma that is sexual assault? The member had previously moved a really good amendment saying that, it's a foregone conclusion that sexual assault does cause a great deal of physical, emotional, mental harm to the person who is assaulted. And I think that ties into his question. I think it answers his question. To what extent should this be legislated? It should be legislated to the extent that sexual assault survivors in these circumstances know unequivocally that legislators stand with them and that they reject the possibility of sexual assault happening in those circumstances again. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support this amendment, and I commend the member for moving it.
Any other speakers? McCain-Rose Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to get up and give a few more remarks. One of my concerns in the debate today, first of all, thank you to the member for moving the amendment. I think it's a good amendment. I think it's an important one. And one of my concerns in this debate today is that we're really focusing on the professionals and we're not focusing on the survivors. And I think that's where our attention needs to lie, is with the survivors. And I just want to go through a few reminders, put some context around where we are today. So the Me Too movement isn't a movement to try and trap anybody. It isn't about making sure that someone is punished. The Me Too movement is to let survivors of sexual assault know that they're not alone, that what they've experienced has been experienced by other people, because the thing that keeps survivors quiet is shame. Shame and guilt and a sense of responsibility for the act that has occurred to them. And another point that I want to make is that sexual assault is not about sexual gratification. It is always about power. It's using sex as a tool to control someone else. So when we think about what prevents people who survived sexual assault from reporting sexual assault, some of the obstacles are a fear of not being believed. So to disclose something that feels so shameful publicly or to another person is a terrifying thing to do. I know I've reported being sexually assaulted to the police. I've stood in this House and I've spoken about years of abuse, and it was one of the scariest things that I've ever had to do in my life, because what if people don't believe me? What if what happened to me doesn't mean anything? It doesn't make any difference. Some of the other concerns are marginalization. So I remember when I did report to the police, I was told by an RCMP officer that they really had a lot of other important things to take a look at, and my case wasn't that important. Any survivor, it's a risk to come forward and to disclose what happened. It's a bigger risk to disclose to police, to law enforcement, because that has a lot of gravity to it. So it's taken so much for a survivor to come forward to a college, if they can even figure out that that's an option for them, and disclose what happened to them, and to create circumstances where they're okay sharing their story. So it's pretty monumental that they've been able to make it that far. Their credibility is always in doubt, and we have a history as a society of laying a lot of blame on survivors and telling them, they shouldn't have been wearing what they were wearing, or they shouldn't have drank what they drank, or shouldn't have been where it was possible for them to be sexually assaulted. And if you think of the circumstances of going to see a health professional and being sexually assaulted, you have that trust. You think that you've already created the circumstances where you won't be sexually assaulted. And 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted throughout their lifetime. All women keep it in the back of their head, how can I be safe? We're not able to walk up and go about our business in the same way that men are. We always are concerned about our safety. So when you are somebody's patient and you're sexually assaulted, it makes the crime even more egregious. It's already awful, and to contravene, to compromise that level of trust, it's unspeakable. There should be strict and very severe consequences for behaving that way. I heard what the minister said about the legislation being the strictest in the country to be introduced, and I appreciate that. I really do. And I would say I'd love to see it be even stricter. I'd love us to be a beacon throughout North America, throughout the world, as to how to handle sexual assault in cases of professional misconduct. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing in the debate today, especially the hesitancy, concerns about constitutionality of the law, what I hear is an undercurrent of fear or concern that we could go that far and there could be a challenge. And I get it, and I'd really like to encourage all of us to act in a different way in spite of that fear. So acknowledge that it's there, because that's what courage is. If you think about the Kavanaugh hearings and I'm blanking on it right now, Blasey, testifying, she was petrified. She had to drink her glass of water with both hands. Like, she was scared. That is a really scary circumstance to be in. And she did it anyway, and that's courage. If we have fears about the constitutionality, and we're smart people in this room, there's nothing blatant about the constitutionality that says, oh, please don't do this right now. I would really encourage us to be courageous and to go ahead and pass this amendment. Right now, we have a chance to provoke societal change in attitude about how we address sexual assault, and we need to take it. And for these reasons, I am supporting this amendment.
Any other members wishing to speak to the amendment?